Hi guys, in this video I'm going to do the first of, I guess, devlog for my little Pong game. I have prepared this little presentation thing because otherwise I know that I'm just going to get lost and just waffle endlessly. So what I'll do before I start talking about any of this stuff, I will just show you where the game is at the moment. So I have changed quite a few things since I did the intro video last time. So let me show you what I've got now. So one thing you'll notice is we have music now. Now hopefully this is not too loud for you because I actually have turned down the audio. I've changed the fonts as well, and you'll notice the screen is a lot bigger, and I'll explain why a little bit later on. So I still suck at the game, that hasn't changed. But if I play a few points, and if I try... Okay, so I don't know if you... Oh, shit. Oh, I really do suck. When I do manage to score, if you have a look at the AI player, right, so notice the AI paddle is getting bigger. So I'm going to talk about why I've done that. And as you can see, the player paddle is also pretty slow. So on the larger screen, it can be quite difficult to get to. I have sped up the ball because I felt like on the bigger screen, it was just so kind of boring at the beginning. So as you can see, now that we've got a little bit of a rally going, it is speeding up, which makes it just a little bit more interesting. But you can see how slow it is. Now, at the moment, it's kind of, as you can see, it's kind of playable, but it's certainly not finished. One of the things that's really missing is that there's no win condition. You basically just play forever until you get bored and quit, which I am. Also, the music is a little bit jarring, the way it just kind of jumps between the two tracks there. So... okay, so that's where I'm at the moment. If you want to see what assets I've used, I have, where is it? No, not there. Oh, I've closed. Oh, no, it's this page. So this is the main page on itch for the game. So here I update all of my assets. So this is where I got the music tracks from, and these are the fonts. So this font pack was pretty cool. They've got like a load of different fonts, and they've got 2 of them. So yeah, so they're pretty cool. So if I change it, I keep changing it. I'm messing with it all the time. I think I've changed the fonts about 3 or 4 times. So yeah, I will just keep this updated. I'm not going to link to this. I'm not going to link to like individual assets and the code and things like that from the video description. I'm just going to put a link to this page, and I'll just keep this one updated so I haven't got to just update a whole bunch of stuff. All right, so if I go back here, right, so in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the code. I'm not going to go through it line by line or anything, obviously, but I'm just going to kind of walk through roughly how I'm structuring it, what's doing what. You will notice that for a simple game of Pong, it's very over-engineered, but that is deliberate. So what I'm trying to do is, I think I mentioned this in the intro video, but I don't just want to, I'm not interested in creating a game of Pong, right? I want to learn how to develop games in general. And I want to kind of learn coding practices for games which are going to be scalable and applicable to other kind of games, more complex games. And so one of the things that I noticed is when I was looking through tutorials, very often the code is, a lot of it for a very simple game, a lot of it will just be simply in one file, because for Pong it is simple enough to do that without a problem. But if you then want to start building a much more complex game, your code's going to get into a massive mess too quickly. So it is a deliberate effect, this over engineering. So before you kind of say, you know criticize me for that, that's why. All right, so the early code now, unfortunately, if I go back to my code here, unfortunately I didn't actually commit to GitHub until I'd already done quite a bit. And obviously I've rewritten this about 3 times. So this is kind of like the later iteration. But what I'm going to quickly show you is on my GitHub here. So this is from the very first commit. So this was a couple of weeks ago. So in MonoGame, your main game class always inherits from the game class, which gives you a little bit of functionality out of the box. But what I did is my game class had pretty much everything. I had quite a lot in here. I was loading all of the stuff kind of in here, so loading the background stuff, paddles, the ball, all of the textures, all of the loading was done here, all of the logic was done here. So this is all the draw code. And where's the update? So yeah, update stuff is like checking for the points scored, what happens if the AI has scored, and so forth. Handling the player movement, the AI movement. This was too big. So what I've got now, I've changed things quite a bit. So one thing you will notice is that this no longer inherits from game, it inherits from something called Calamo. Now that is something I'm going to talk about in a separate video. Basically, if I go back to my GitHub, I've got two projects on here, two repositories. So Calamo is just some common code for my MonoGame games. So I've got stuff to manage state, input, and some so there's another one for state, some objects. I'm not going to go through this today. I will talk about that in a separate video, but this is stuff that I'm planning to add to through each game. So obviously I don't really, at this stage, I don't really know what I need. But when I was first starting to look through this, I had things like a ball class and a paddle class, but they didn't do a lot. So it had like its bounding rectangle, it had vector. Ooh, oh, what just done? Ah, I don't know what I just pressed. Okay, it had. Oh my God, what have I done? Oh shit! I've pressed something. All right, here we go. Yeah, so it had some very simple stuff like position and velocity. And then I noticed I was doing the same kind of stuff on here. So I'm updating the position, I'm updating the bounding rectangle and the velocity, and I was doing the same kind of thing in the paddle class somewhere. And so I thought, right, I could sort of abstract this out into a common class. So that's why I was doing that kind of stuff. So what I'm also doing now is, have I mentioned this on here? No. So one of the things that I've started to learn about is game state. Now I still don't know a whole lot about this, but this stuff here, SM add state, and then switch state, this is something that is in my base project. So don't worry about it at the moment, but I'll just show you most of the game logic is in those two state classes. So I want to keep the main game class to be quite lightweight. So the update doesn't do a whole lot. It handles the key press for escapes. If you escape from the title screen, it'll actually quit the game. Other than that, all it does is it passes update over to the state manager, and that will simply update the current state class. And same with draw. So the graphics device, it just clears the screen to a kind of a background, very dark grey. And then again, it just passes draw over to state class. So I think it just makes it a little bit clearer. So the majority of the code is in my two state classes. So this one, actually, if I go to title first, this one's really simple. This literally has a couple of text objects for the main title text and the instructions. One thing with MonoGame, if I show you the content, actually. So I don't have a whole load of content in here. So the textures is like the board. I haven't got rid of the first one. So the second board was the one that I did, which was the bigger version with a sort of a thicker dotted line. I've got the paddles in there, the score bar and the ball. But the fonts, you have to put in something called a sprite font, and this has to define its size as well. You can't dynamically put the font size on the fly, which I find a little bit limiting. But anyway, the instructions is literally a text string, which I've just built up here. I've put in manual spacing. It doesn't even support tab characters, as I found out the hard way. Now, when you enter the state, music plays. Now, one thing, actually, that's a good point. One thing I didn't show you is I've now implemented a pause. I can pause the game, but it doesn't pause the music. So that's something I need to put in. So that's for the future. So yeah, the title state really doesn't do a lot. It just draws text on the screen. Most of the code is in the play state. And this point, what I'm trying to do here is have classes that manage the objects, so like the paddle and the ball. I want those to be quite lightweight, so the paddle doesn't know about the ball, it doesn't know when it's hit the ball. All of that kind of logic is in the state class. So the paddle knows how to draw itself. So I tell it a max height, so I tell it that's the furthest it can move on the screen. Sorry, not the furthest it can move on the screen, the biggest it can grow because of the AI paddle can actually grow, I've now got the code in there. So if I've got like move up, move down, which is quite simple, and I've got a grow function here. So it's only allowed to grow so many times, because what was happening, the reason I've changed to a bigger screen is on the small screen that I had, once I implemented the code to allow the AI paddle to grow, it was very quickly occupying like the majority of the screen. And then it was like, doot, 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 and that was it. It could just bounce everything back. You couldn't possibly win against it. So I thought in order to make that actually playable, it needs to be bigger. Now, oh yeah, before I talk about the AI, actually, the score rendering bug. um, Such a stupid thing. So I've got a class called score bar, and all this is if I just play it again, at the top there, so you've got these little purple things, so it's rendering those two little graphics, and then it's just rendering the two scores. So that's all that is. So the two little graphics are textures, and then obviously the scores is just integers, and they're just passed in here, and that's all it does. But when I introduced the score bar, I got this bug, because what I do here for the ball bouncing, when I didn't have a score bar, because when I first started the game, I just drew the background, I drew the paddles on the screen, and then I just implemented the bouncing so that it would just basically clamp to the size of the window. And that worked fine at first. When I did the score bar, that effectively moved that play area down just a little bit, sort of adjusted to the height of that score bar. It all went horribly wrong. And for ages, I was thinking I'm trying to think, where is it calculated? Somewhere I'm calculating a play area. Where is it? Here, play area. Where am I even doing that? Okay, but somewhere, oh, there it is. Yeah, this line here, I'm calculating the play area, and it's based on the board size. But it was also adjusted by the score bar, and it all just went horribly wrong. So I'm adding on here the score bar and the board height here. And basically what I had done, I come back to my game, it was this. So I set the back buffer width and height. That is the size of your screen, assuming you don't allow the player to actually resize it. I'd forgotten to write this line. I didn't know that you needed to put this apply changes. So what was happening was, this is on my smaller screen, it wasn't adjusting, and so all of the clamping was incorrect. It wasn't that the calculations are wrong, it was that I haven't written this apply changes. Such a stupid little bug, but that stumped me for hours, that one. Right, okay, AI difficulty scaling. So for me, one of my problems is that this kind of game, and probably the first several games that I'm going to do, I might do things like Flappy Bird, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Snake, Frogger, I don't know. So little simple old school games like that. And the problem with those games is they all are basically arcade games that are relying on having reflexes. And I absolutely suck at games like that. Even when I was a kid, I sucked at games like that. I used to play text adventures when I was little. And so the problem for me is, of course, I need to test this. So one of the reasons I haven't done a win condition is because usually you would have the first to 10 points wins the game. So I can test the AI winning very easily, but testing for the player to get the 10 points, that's a lot harder. It'd probably take me like an hour of playing it to do that. So what I wanted to do instead was have a way of making the game playable and have it so that I can at least test the core components on a really easy difficulty, but have that difficulty scale up. So that is why I've implemented this AI scaling. So every time the AI scores a point, where's the code for that? Right, sorry. When the player scores a point, the AI speed increases and the AI paddle grows. So on every point scored, it gets bigger and it gets faster. So it gets harder and harder and harder and harder to beat. So what I'm going to do is to do a win condition. I'm basically going to have it like a kind of a survival game where I'll just set up a timer, and the idea is you survive as long as you can and score as many points as you can against the AI. As soon as it scores against you, game over. So that's the way I intend to implement that, and that's why basically the reason why I've done it is so that I can play it, but it's still playable for other people. Okay, I've already talked about the bigger board size. So upcoming improvements. So there's a few things which are missing. So there's music on here, and one thing that is a big no-no, especially for people like me, you need the ability to turn it off or at least turn it down. So that is going to require some kind of configuration. Now it should be fairly simple to do, you know, just press like maybe M to mute or something like that. So I might do that where I had the pause. I could have put in some code there to mute it as well, and then I can just call the mute from the pause or something like that. But really, this is the kind of thing that I think is going to be applicable to any game, right? Any game is going to need to be able to mute the sound, adjust the volume, and that's the kind of thing that I want to go in my base project. So I kind of need to think it through a little bit before I put that in. Another thing that it needs is if I'm going to do a survival type game, I'd want like a high score system to be able to put your name in, you know, like the old school games, and you know you've scored 12 points or something, and then have a few of them displayed at the end and maybe save that to disk. And again, it's the kind of thing that should be applicable to many games, so I'll probably put that in my base project. And then there's two other things I want to do. One is that at the moment, if I show the game again, have a look at the ball angle. Basically, do you know what? I'm just going to slow the speed of the ball down a little bit. Let me just put that down to 5. All right. So it randomly sets the kind of y-axis. So on every new ball, it will be a little bit different. That's not looking very random, actually. I might need to test that some more. But if you have a look at the bounce, it always bounces at the same angle. So whatever the first, this one's a little bit flatter. So whatever you start out with on the serve, it stays at that angle throughout the whole play. So this is going to be just kind of quite flat throughout the whole play. And as a result, this is probably going to be a long rally. So I'm probably not going to be able to beat that AI on that kind of angle. Come on. No, I'm not going to beat it. There you go. But if you've got a steeper angle, it's easier to beat. But the problem with that is it's boring, right? So what I was thinking of doing, one thing I've seen, one thing I might show some other games that I've been playing actually. I went onto Itch, and have I still got them up? No, I don't. I went onto Itch and I was looking through a whole bunch of other Pong games which other people have written, and just played a few of them to get some inspiration and see what kind of things that other people had done. And what most people have done is when the ball hits the paddle, depending on whereabouts the ball hits, so if it hits right in the middle, it would kind of bounce it back at that 90-degree angle. If it hits it here, it's going to be more of an angle. But if it hits it right, say the bottom of the paddle, it's going to hit it more of a sharp angle, but not too sharp, otherwise it ends up sort of bouncing like that and it'll take forever to get to the screen. So I thought about doing something like that. But what I thought about doing instead, to make it a little bit different, is to have a paddle rotation. So you've got the W and S to move the paddle up and down, and then put in an A and D so that you can actually start to rotate the paddle a little bit, so you can actually direct where the ball is going to go, and that's going to give it a little bit of strategy and make it more interesting, especially on the plays where it's a little bit flat. So that's one thing I want to put in. And another thing is I think it'd be cool to have some kind of power-up system. Now I haven't exactly figured out how I'm going to do that. What I'll probably do is have an extra ball come in randomly, and it'll be a coloured ball. So that will come in from the right hand side, and if you manage to bounce that ball back as well as you're keeping the white ball in play, it's going to give you some kind of power up. And I'll probably have like 3 or 4 different types, and then depending on the colour you'll get a different power up and it will do something different. So that I think will make the game more interesting, and if I can implement those 2 features, then I think it will be complete. So I think that's about all I need for this video. So on itch, where's it gone? On the itch page, the code is on here. Obviously, anytime I update it, obviously I'm keeping the GitHub repository updated, so you can see. Not on that one. Should go back to the other. Yeah, so I've done a few more commits on this one, 16 commits. So yeah, I did. Yeah, so here I changed to the larger board size. Luckily I didn't have to change too much stuff actually, because I had done it fairly dynamic. Most of it was fiddling with the speed. Yeah, so I think that's about it for this video. Oh, also somebody in the last video said that the audio was quiet, and I noticed there was quite a heavy background hiss on it. So I'm hoping that this is better. Please do give me your feedback on the audio. If it is still too quiet, or if it just doesn't sound good, please let me know, and I'll continue to try and tweak it for future videos. All right, thanks very much for watching, guys. See you next time.